Hey guys, what's up? It's Thomas. Today, well, I figured I'd come back to here. It's Jack Rackham again. Today we're actually over to World War II with why didn't Germany hold a grudge? Well, because we're about to find out why they didn't just bring the Nazi party back. I'm actually kind of curious to see what things changed. Like, I think it's kind of a glossed over fact now I think about it. Like, you could have easily just, rallied again, but here, not so much. I'm just kind of curious to see what happened. So, let's see what you got for us, Jack. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hoping you guys enjoy it. Let's check it out.
Let's put you in the shoes of the Allies in 1945. Congratulations! You've just won the biggest war in history. Quick question, what are you gonna do with Germany? Because, World War III would not be fun, and your constituents all agree that a world without Nazis would be best for everyone. You could try suppressing the country so far down they can never rise up to be a serious threat again, but, well, you tried that at the end of World War I.
Yeah, that
look how
didn't
far
work.
that got you. And besides, you'd better make sure that the new government has everything it needs to be stable and won't be supplanted by other regional or rebel factions like Afghanistan or Iraq. What if you split up Germany into a bunch of smaller countries? That way they can all industrialize and develop and get rich however they please, but none of them will be too powerful to threaten the whole world again. Not a bad idea, but, well, that's sort of what Napoleon did in 1806, and it wasn't too long before somebody started putting all the pieces back together, and they did it by creating the most heavily militarized population in the entire world. I mean, if you really want a say in how things are run in Germany, you could try annexing it, but on top of conquest being a big yikes, who's gonna get it? That's gonna be a big upset to the balance of power, not to mention incredibly expensive. You just spent all your money fighting the biggest war in history. Your third world colonies are getting uppity already, so good luck with that. You definitely can't just leave Germany alone, because what's gonna happen if you give the vote back to the Nazis? You're just gonna get Hitler 2.0, right? This video is sponsored by MyHeritage, the world's greatest family history service. I love learning my family history. It makes me feel like an explorer, putting the pieces of a long-lost map back together. I used it to discover I'm a 7th cousin of the Bush family. That's because signing up for MyHeritage gives you access to over 19 billion records to help you discover your origins. And with their Instant Discoveries feature, like you see here, MyHeritage will automatically match your relatives with records on other people's trees and can fill out parts of your family tree for you. You might end up discovering relatives you didn't even know you had, especially if you're a person of German ancestry living in Argentina. Instant Discoveries will also pull up photographs of your relatives, and MyHeritage can bring them to life in full color, even animate them. If you use the QR code on screen or the link in the description, you can get access to everything MyHeritage has to offer with your 14-day free trial. And if you decide to keep your subscription, you'll get a whole 50% off. Happy exploring. Hello and welcome.
Kind of curious to see how it happens, since, well, like he said, can't give too much power, otherwise, well, World War III does seem like a bit of a balancing act, now I think about it. It's kind of crazy. We don't know, like, the nitty-gritty details. Like, we know, like, the overarching arc of, like, hey, after occupation, Germany was, like, okay. So what happened? Shall we?
Welcome to the first part in a series I like to call The Second Half of the 1940s is actually really important, but we always brush over it in favor of World War II. World War II is why things changed, but how the world changed for the next 50 plus years is the story of 1945 to 1950. So I want to take a look at the four biggest players in the European theater and take a look at their place in the New World Order. Starting with the most undisputed baddies of history, the Nazis. Take a bet, how many times do you think I can say that word before this video gets demonetized? As you may know, after the First World War, France led an effort to punish Germany really badly. And this led to Germany being a really sore loser, blaming the Jews and invading their neighbors. That's why in 1939, as soon as Britain declared war on Germany, the Allies were already working together to come up with a plan for how to handle the country after the war, so that history wouldn't repeat itself. The UK
off the
and the
table
United
at that
States
point?
put out a really important document that's probably going to show up a lot in the rest of
Charter
this
here?
series called the Atlantic Charter, and they made one thing very clear to Germany. This would not be a repeat of 1918. They wouldn't go too heavy with reparations, and they wouldn't be taking any territory. Wait, America? Why are you saying you won't take my land? Do you want me to take your land? We're not even at war yet! Which is why I won't be gaining any territory. Oh, is that why you are signing off on statements about the final destruction of Nazi tyranny? No, that's because you're a head. Now, once the
Fair.
Soviet Union joined the war against Germany, well, working in Stalin's vision of the future was a little
Yeesh.
awkward. The Allies' whole first major conference together was a little awkward. Even working with Stalin in the first place felt like teaming up against the forces of evil with friendship, harmony, incredible violence, and love.
Alright, welcome to the conference.
And then you'll open a second front in Western Europe, right? Well, we'd better cross our I's and dot our T's and knock out Italy first. You'll cross your I's, and then you will open a second front. Give us till summer of 44. At this rate, the war's end will have more dead Russians than living Englishmen. And what a happy day that will be.
Wait.
When the war is over, I mean. Now look. Opening a second front is easy enough, but how do we close the door on a third war? This is easy part. We round up 50 to 100,000 German officers and shoot them in the head. Oh dear. You think 49,000 would be too few? I've had about enough of this. I was only joking. Come back. Stalin is not a man who solves his problems with purges. By the time 1945
sure about
rolled
that?
around, the trio had put together a plan. The country would be split into 4 zones, administered by the 3 major powers, and also France, as a sign of jolly cooperation. There had been some talks about dividing Germany on a more permanent basis. After all, Germany had only been united for less than a century, and had given everyone such a headache in that time. But ultimately, they agreed the division would only last as long as the occupation did. Once Berlin fell and the war was won, the challenge of winning the peace began in earnest. The occupation zones received their final borders, and the Soviet Union, who didn't really care about the Atlantic Charter, took off a chunk of the eastern border to be Poland's consolation prize. The first step was to completely uproot the German legal system. The economy was decentralized, cartels were broken up, and all the Nazi laws on the basis of race, creed, and political opinion were abolished. Then, of course, the justice and educational systems needed their own overhauls, and a new constitution would need to be drafted in order to make sure that the changes would stick. The top brass of
So just restart everything from scratch. Alright. I can see where they're going with this. It's actually a good call, though gotta break them of the ideology. I'm not too sure how much of the population was like diehard Nazis to people who were just doing it just to survive. That's the big question of how to determine who's who. I think that's a big question. Like, you could go for high officers who benefited from it. Could go from there. But, again, you gotta be careful. If you kill too many of them, people are gonna riot and see us tyrants. Anyway.
the Nazi Party were tracked down as much as possible to be made an example of. 24 men were brought to face trial in Nuremberg for war crimes and crimes against humanity. At the same time, the US, in its portion of the country, began running campaigns showing the horrors of the Holocaust to German civilians.
Oof.
And you know,
That works.
Germany today has a great track record of coming to terms with its past human rights violations, unlike, well, quite a few other countries. So the occupation must have been a huge success. Except, the first couple years were pretty rough. The initial policy of taking no steps to rehabilitate Germany led to intense food shortages, and it wasn't until a report from Herbert Hoover, of all people, and a change in leadership that things began to improve. And yet, when you look at all the surveys of public opinion that the US ran, things didn't seem to be moving in the right direction. Right after the Nuremberg trials, about 6% of Germans said that they were unfair. By 1950, that number was about 33%, and 37% of Germans answered that the extermination of other races was necessary for the security of Germans. Although, in fairness, that one had been phrased weirdly. In 1945, 59% believed that Nazism wasn't a bad idea, and in 1947, that number had risen to 70%. 42% of Germans wanted a new Führer. Meanwhile, the Allies are totally swamped trying to process the millions of Germans who were part of the Nazi Party to determine who the true radicals are to keep them out of power. Imagine having to run a background check on everyone in the country. And imagine trying to do that while pressure is mounting from back home. The war is over. Bring our soldiers back home. We can't take on any more debt. So, for the sake of efficiency, the process became increasingly lax as time went on. Laws about fraternizing with civilians were lifted, German citizens were trained to run the background checks on their neighbors, the whole process was subject to corruption. There were these certificates that said you might have been part of Nazi society, but in your heart of hearts, you weren't really a bad guy. And all of those certificates ended up getting bought and sold on the black market. At a certain point, with few exceptions, everyone under the age of 25 at the time of the war's end was just let free on the grounds that they had just been brainwashed and there was nothing you could do. As time went on, elections were rolled out, first at the local level, then the regional, and eventually the national level when Germany had been reunited. West Germany, anyway. Stalin was doing Stalin things to the zone he'd occupied. A man named Konrad Adenauer was elected chancellor and called for an end to the denazification process. Of course, the US recognized that the project was not going so well. It was counterproductive and ineffective, so they were willing to let it go, but all the same, hey bro, stop picking on the Nazis so hard, is a little scary to hear coming from a German chancellor. And yet, plot twist number 2, progress continued? The Adenauer government, which lasted 14 years, they were the ones who started giving out reparations of their own volition. And with time, the opinions on the Third Reich began to shift again. After those first frightful years of occupation where food was scarce, a new currency tackled the problem of inflation, and investment from the United States kickstarted German exports. The economy started chugging along, and that kind of killed the itch for any radical new government. I have to imagine there weren't many people thinking to themselves, sure, my life is getting better, but I stubbed my toes this morning, and for that the minority must die! Perhaps the biggest difference between the end of World War I and World War II is just how overwhelming that defeat really was, and how clear it was that the world was moving on. With the Cold War heating up and with Germany being split between East and West, it was clear that if World War III ever happened, Germans wouldn't just be on the front line, Germany would be the front line. East and West Germany each had to pick a side in a polarized world, and in both cases, making new friends meant no more of that fascist tomfoolery. I'm still not sure what to make of this. Germany changed so dramatically over the course of the 20th century that I was kind of expecting some brilliant master plan, as though the world had cracked the code on how to turn even the most violent, hateful society into a stable, free, and peaceful democracy. That the only reason other occupations have failed is either incompetence or a price tag. Make no mistake, there was a deliberate human element to Germany's recovery. New generations grew up with a chance to reflect on the horrors of the Nazi regime. There are records of many small positive interactions between Germans and occupying soldiers that shaped opinions through word of mouth, acts of kindness, of friendship, of love. But it would seem that what really did the trick wasn't the monumental effort to reshape society, it was the realpolitik of a changing world. I find that a bit chilling. After all, if society can improve in spite of the counterproductive efforts of those with the most power to shape it, what are we supposed to do when the pendulum swings the other way? Join us next time, because the world Germany emerged into in 1950 was a very different place than just 5 years before.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think if you compare it, it's definitely more of a changing viewpoint. Though I think the whole Holocaust thing, you can definitely see, like, oh, that's a growing conscience right there. You can definitely see that. But still, the fact that it took, like, just getting a stable ground, be like, yeah, we were assholes. That's basically how they were able to turn things around. You gotta give them credit. It's pretty incredible. So, what do you guys think? It's pretty... Still. I mean, goes to show you, sometimes just gotta hope for the best. And actually, I remember with Japan, sure, they did the thing. I mean, sure, we occupied them too, but I think it was also the changing time periods, because, well, you know, they basically got nuked. What else are you gonna do? Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Hope you enjoyed. Till next time, adios.